Oh my god, we're back again. With another one of these, because tiering discussions are heating up, so I will give an update on the State of the Union and my own thoughts. So the impetus for this video is, of course, the fact that SPL is over, and people have given their opinions on what they would like to see changed in the tier, if anything. Now, I will not be showing the posts in this video because it's tough to follow along with posts, when you're watching. And I really dislike it when the video slows down and someone just reads you something that you could read yourself. So instead, I will link this in the pinned comment, and you can peruse it at your leisure. But this is just a quick demonstration of the discussions that are going on. If you would like to read it yourself. And oh, look, there's me. But yeah, I will be going over the general ideas that were put forth in this thread, and my views on DPP OU and its tiering health as a whole. So yeah, my post here is just talking about it's a nice little one-liner about how not getting rid of Ironhead in DPP is one of the greatest failures of Smogon bureaucracy. And I've seen a lot of them, so I don't say that lightly. So, yeah, these are the posts that the discussion consists of. And, yeah, some are familiar, like obviously Jirachi's been discussed a million times. And some are, new. And not all of them are as likely to have some sort of action taken on them. For example, while I sympathize with the point that Confuse Ray is silly, I don't see action being taken on it. Who knows? If we can get rid of acupressure, then why not? But yeah. So now we are going to the replays from the most recent of SPL for those who would like to watch the metagame in action as I break things down. So, number one, obviously, Jirachi Ironhead. The big debate here is not whether Ironhead Jirachi is busted. Personally, I think even Ironhead Jirachi is good for the tier. Well, okay, that might be stretching it a little, but I do believe it provides an important litmus test for team building and playing, a kind of healthy gatekeeping restriction that, in the vein of something like Arrow and DD Tar Rock Slide in Advance, where they are so ruthless in punishing you if you want to cheat in the team builder, that I think that's a good thing. I made a video not too long ago about the importance of good steal resists in DPP, and it's not just for Jirachi either. You think, oh, well, I have to go out of my way to counter Jirachi. It's like, well, no. By handling Ironhead Jirachi in this way, you were also shoring yourself up against some other very serious threats. So it's not like you were going out of your way to include something. And the nature of Pokemon is that there are always going to be best Pokemon or better Pokemon and the best Pokemon, and they are going to be restrictive. Now, that is somewhat besides the point if the Pokemon in question has checks but is unhealthy. So, here's where I stand, and I think a lot of other players sympathize with me on this because a lot of other informed players, let's say, because I've been part of some discussions which were infuriating. So basically, I think the tier is fine as is, don't need to make any changes. However, if I had, my way, I would get rid of Ironhead on Jirachi. Because while I don't think Ironhead Jirachi ruins the tier or anything, I do think the tier would be better without it. Now, do I want to get rid of Jirachi as a whole? Not really. I mean, I don't think the tier would collapse without it, and more on that once we get to number two, or suspect, or a potential suspect number two, but yeah, I think it would be a terrible waste to get rid of all the good Jirachi brings, just because our policy does not allow us to get rid of Ironhead. And I think what Jirachi brings to the tier is a stability. For a long time there were discussions about, DPP, you have to guess last, and it's too unpredictable and unstable. And, against these, those were silly complaints to begin with. But the consistency with which Jirachi shut kind of brainless, degenerate hyper offense teams down was a big part of making these complaints go away, and DPP's image shifted away from that. Now, I'm not just talking about image in terms of public perception, because that is not an indicator of a tier's health or lack thereof. But it is an example of how those teams were very dangerous for a time, and Jirachi shut them down. So I think that, because old generations are not the same thing as new generations. If this was a new generation, then it'd be, or a current generation, then it'd be like, yeah, okay, get rid of it, see what happens. We have all that. But limited player base, and it is much more difficult to get these drastic changes off the ground and develop them. And I mean, again, I'm not against it as if it's a matter of life and death. If we need to get rid of Jirachi, we need to get rid of Jirachi. I just don't think we do. So that's why I have the idealized version of just get rid of Ironhead. Another idea I had, because people were complaining about Waterfall Gyarados and its flinch rate, and I do think that Gyara can do some stupid stuff, like few other Pokemon in the tier can, but I also don't really think it's an issue. But if enough people think it is an issue, just ban flinch moves 20% and higher. So that way you also axe Togekiss, which I saw was argued for as busted. I don't think that's going anywhere, but it was mentioned. And you get rid of, I guess you lose Sky Attack Gliscor, which is a shame, but oh well. If you can get rid of the two moves that are regularly stealing games, which are Ironhead Jirachi and Waterfall Gyarados. So, if you want to do that, then fine. And there was a whole argument, I won't rehash it here, but there was a whole argument about, oh, well, we don't do that unless it's every single one. And it's like, well, we have Sleep Claws, Freeze Claws. Oh, no, those are exceptions. And that's why this whole thing, if it's not literally just Ironhead, just doing something about it, some sort of, it's not a complex one if you just get rid of Ironhead. Oh, it's not broken on every Pokemon. Who cares? Nothing else even uses it. I have no issue with, given the game that we're playing, just pruning the ban list to make the best version of the established DPP OU that we have and have had for a long time, considering that big sweeping changes are much more difficult to pull off given its status as such an established metagame. So yes, we do have much more reason to prune it more specifically, to tailor it to be the best version of itself. And this adherence to policy, it's not for the good of the game, so forest for the trees and everything. And it's a whole exasperating thing, and I'll stop myself there before I get too much further. Feel free to ask in the comments if you need some clarification. But yeah, I would ideally just get rid of Ironhead, not Jirachi, which has been... In fact, there's a whole debate going on right now in the policy review section of the forums, because this is an issue in DPP, and it's an issue in Black and White, because some people want to ban Sandforce Excadrill and not just Excadrill, because you need Excadrill, but Sandforce is broken, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what are the rules for? Yes, we have to follow the rules, but the rules are to make the game better, so maybe we need to change the rules. The rules did not come out of nowhere, hewn into rock, sent from above. So, yeah, that was why I voiced my frustration in that thread about the failure of this institution to serve the game as it was created to. So yeah, that's how I feel about Jirachi. Because I'm not the only person who says, yes, Jirachi is stupid, but I don't want to get rid of it. Every time they do one of those tiering surveys and they say, what do you think about Jirachi? People say, well, I hate Ironhead Jirachi, but I don't want to get rid of Jirachi full stop. And, Jirachi without Ironhead is the furthest thing from a problem, of course. Like Calm Mind Jirachi, I think, is a very, very healthy addition to the tier. I love its place in the metagame. And I think SFG made a post expressing a similar sentiment in the thread. And other Jirachis, there's so many non-Ironhead Jirachi sets that are perfectly healthy. And I think what they do with it's not so easy as just replacing Jirachi. Like someone was saying, and with all due respect to whoever said this, oh, you can replace Jirachi with Spadef and Polion, or like Metagross or Bronzong. And it's like, it's not the worst replacement in the world, but if you think it's just a one-for-one, and even if you're not saying it's a one-for-one, you do lose a good sense of stability in the tier. if you have to use these inferior defensive Pokemon in Jirachi's stead. And if they're not inferior, then they would be being used over Jirachi more consistently. But the reason you use Jirachi is because it's the best. So yeah, I don't think it's. I would just get rid of Ironhead. Worst case, we just grin and bear it. Because again, I don't really mind what Ironhead does, but I'm also, in terms of the aforementioned, the predominant effect it has on team building and playing, not just including it in the team builder, but really forcing you to preserve your important Pokemon while executing your own strategy, so you win and not just prevent yourself from losing to Jirachi. They're two different things. You have to execute them simultaneously. I really like that test of skill. But yeah, I'm also very much in favor of getting rid of the degenerate aspects of the game, which is why, nobody uses Sand Attack. Don't care. Get rid of it. Not an exact comparison, but that's where I stand. But I also see more players, who are now so fed up with Jirachi, the French players in particular, I noticed, and I think DBC as well. I don't remember. That's not really the point. I saw more general support saying, look, we can do without Jirachi. It'll be a bad loss, but the tier will not be completely ruined by it. Which, for the record, I agree with, which is why, as I said before, I don't mind the prospect of losing Jirachi. I just think it should be avoided if we can help it, and of course we can help it. We're not trying to fight against some physical law of nature that says Jirachi must remain in the tier for the good. Physical law of nature that says Ironhead. You know what I'm getting at. I'm getting frustrated with all the nonsense of policy. But hey, yeah. So there's basically that. So number 2 is Latios. I don't think people have an issue with it anymore. I never really minded its play. I mean, I was one of the biggest advocates of Latios coming back, and I really love what it has added to the tier and the direction the tier has gone. And it's bringing so many great possibilities, healthy possibilities. And previously, when people started cottoning on to the idea that Latios might be too much, I made a video last year about how it's the new number 1 Pokemon in the tier. Yes, even ahead of Jirachi. Usage, viability, all that. And I think not totally unrelated was the fact that some people really didn't like how good it was. How it kind of warped the metagame around it. They thought to an unhealthy degree, but I think that sentiment has dissipated. And another sentiment that existed before was, people wanted to ban Jirachi, of course, because people have wanted to ban Jirachi since forever. But they always said, if you ban Jirachi, Latios has to go too, because one of the reasons Latios is broken is because of Jirachi. But because Jirachi has slowly, I don't want to say gotten worse, because that doesn't really convey the concept, but Jirachi has certainly become less overwhelming. So, and people are regularly handling Latios without Jirachi all the time. It's not difficult. It's expected. It's not something you have to put some sort of grandiose effort towards. So and this is why people are saying, yeah, I think we can just ban Jirachi and not have to ban Latios after. And if Latios winds up being broken, then it winds up being broken and we get rid of it. But it doesn't really seem like that, which is the first time that sentiment has existed. And I find myself agreeing with it. So Latios, you can refer to last year's discourse around it and the video I made, where the idea was, yeah, it's the new number 1. Maybe people don't like it, but I don't think people really have an issue with Latios right now. I think they generally like it. Yeah, so number 3 is Clefable. It's so funny how Clef is thought to be uber now. Now, I made a video at the beginning of this year about whether Clefable should be unbanned, whether Clefable should be banned from DPP OU or not. So I won't really rehash that. And I'll just refer you to that video. I'll probably link it in the pinned comment too for easy access. But yeah, I think if the sentiment existed before, it's doubly strong now. It seems to be spreading throughout the player base. I still personally really like what Clefable does for the tier, and in fact, I'm planning another video about the effect Clef has had. Well, not just because I made a video a long time ago about the rise of Clef in DPP, but I specifically mean the developments, the positive developments of Clef. You know, to reiterate them. I don't know. I still have to think about that one, but. Yeah, I say that to say that I think Clef provides a lot of positives for DPP, and I understand the restrictive nature of it, the way it shuts down a lot of special attackers, but I find it's not an overwhelming kind of restriction. I find it a healthy restriction. And again, like Jirachi, I like that it keeps a lid on players, or on the ability to just, run wild with whatever special attacker you see fit to, or other things people go nuts about, like entry hazards. I think Clef being able to stand up against them is really, really healthy. So, I don't know, I like Clef's presence in this vein, and I mean, I guess it sucks that Shaman is unviable pretty much, but I don't know, I like what Clef does. I think there's plenty of ways to take advantage of its weaknesses. But I have to say that I am seeing more and more sentiment against Clef. So I don't see it take. I don't know. I guess I could see it. I don't see. Okay, let me organize that. I could see Clefable gaining enough support for a suspect. But I don't see it happening ahead of Jirachi, which clearly seems to be a bigger issue. But if you were to get rid of Jirachi, and we're not going to speculate on, what if you ban Jirachi and Clefable? What happens then? A lot of the tier will look similar. The biggest change, obviously, if you get rid of Clef, is that defense has to completely restructure itself to be more. How is it going to deal with hazards now? Because Clef enables those Superman structures. And pre-Clef, there were a lot of rapid spin ghost pursuit wars that people hated. I thought they were totally fine, especially because it's not like you committed to some blood oath where you had to participate in them. But I get it. So I see and I think this is preferable to have such a healthy answer to them, especially because Hazard is still so powerful, even with Clef in the picture. So, I don't know. I don't think that the metagame would be ruined without Clef around. I mean, God, how could you think that? But I do like what it brings. I don't see it happening yet. Maybe in the future. Maybe. Jirachi first, probably, but Jirachi, maybe. Latios, very unlikely. Clefable, unlikely at this time, but I see it getting likelier over time. So, I don't know, and Clefable brings me to the next one, which is kind of. Well, the next two are both fighting types, so I'll start with one of. With something that has been a subject of scorn before, and that is Sleep / Breloom, because nobody is complaining about Roserade and its sleep powder. It's really just the fact that Breloom is, well, first of all, it's got the most reliable sleep, and it punishes sleep talkers very well. The fact that Rest Talk Jirachi gets used is testament to that. And yeah, I'm somewhat similar to Jirachi on this, to my stance on Jirachi on this, because I think Breloom is completely fine the way it is. However, I am also a fan of getting rid of, stupid junk that ruins the game. And while I don't think Spore is quite as bad as, Ironhead in this regard, I do think that Sleep as a whole is a silly mechanic. I'm glad people are, reconsidering Sleep in every generation in light of the Gen 9 ban. And I mean, they were already doing that when it was banned from Gen 5. Not everything has the mechanics of Gen 5, of course, but it's still just a fundamentally goofy status. And Breloom really, by being such a reliable user of it and such a threat in its own right, really puts that goofiness on display. So, and the thing is that Breloom does not need Spore. It has been well established for several years now that Breloom has a million great sets that do not need Spore at all. You know, its strengths are, you know, it's typing, poison heal, stabs, everything. And Spore obviously is incredible, and you want it more than you don't want it by a significant margin, but it would still be a great Pokemon. You know, the value it brings to its teams, you know, Mach Punch checking, DD Tard, and Empoleon, and, you know, everything weakened, and, you know, being able to pressure stall. I mean, it still does that even without Spore. You know, sometimes you don't even want to throw out Spore because, you know, you have the threat of Lumberry on the opposing team. Lumberry, which is very good for Breloom, but not just for Breloom. You know, Jirachi, a favorite of mine, is very common for things like Body Slam Jirachi, or, you know, absorbing a Willows from Rotom or something. And, but mostly Rachi. Or even like a Discharge from Zapdos. That's another big one. You know, when playing around things with status is so big. And I mean, even Breloom likes running Stun Spore. So yeah, sometimes you just want to attack, and, you know, in those situations you're not even using the Spore that's in your moveset. Obviously, it's the threat of it that's big, but pretty much everything Breloom threatens with Spore, it threatens even without Spore. You know, and you can do so many things with Breloom. It will still be an immense threat even without Sleep. You know, so, I mean, Breloom threatens us, even if you have that Rest Talk Rotom or whatever, you can still threaten the opposing team greatly. You know, people run Swords Dance, Leech Seed. You know, there's so many things it can do. You know, I'm a bit fan of Toxic Breloom personally. Ruin those Gliscors and those Zapdoses and those Latioses. Yeah, and there's a million variants even Toxic Loom can go with. Offensive, defensive. Yeah, great Pokemon. And so yeah, I could see Sleep getting thrown around or thrown out just as a, you know, excuse me. I don't like when people try to make sweeping cross-generational policy decisions, i.e., oh, well, Baton Pass is dumb in this generation, therefore we will get rid of it in advance as well. Like, leave that alone, come on. But I could see Sleep garnering some support as, you know, just a fundamentally bad mechanic that we shouldn't be instituting the mechanic-breaking Sleep Clause to deal with. And I will have no issues with Sleep going. I think it would be fine. So I said earlier, I'm pretty sure anyway, that I don't feel the need to make any changes to DPP, but I'm also in favor of, you know, making improvements if possible. So if we could axe things like Iron Head and Spore, or, you know, Sleep in general, or honestly just Spore. You know, Roserade Sleep Powder, there's no reason to axe that. That's not overwhelming. So just get rid of Spore. If it's all Sleep, it's all Sleep. But, you know, if you can just limit it to Spore to preserve Roserade Sleep Powder, I think that's ideal. But yeah, something in that vein I would be a fan of. Now, the other fighting type relating to status is Machamp. And people have complained about Paraspam for a long time. I get the complaints, obviously. Machamp Paraspam can be, you know, the stupidest thing ever, and Jirachi, and yeah, it's all dumb. You throw Gara into the mix and it can get ugly, but I think Paraspam can be a very legitimate strategy. I mean, Breloom with Paraspam, I mean, hey, talk about not needing Spore. You know, you're trying to T-Wave everything and slow it down. You know, you don't want to waste a moveset on moveslot on Spore. You want to get SD and get 3 attacks in there. But, yeah, that's a perfectly viable threat, abusing Paraspam without the need of, you know, fishing for paras or, you know, confusion or flinches, anything like that. So, yeah, I don't necessarily mind Paraspam as a strategy, even when including Machamp and Jirachi antics. But again, if we're pruning the tier just to... Because I also think that this is lower on my list. Again, it's similar to the... If we could maybe just get rid of Dynamic Punch, you know, that would be ideal. And again, I realize this sounds like, you know, oh, complex bands, whatever. And again, refer to my previous philosophy of, you know, we are in a position where we can make the game the most specific version of it. I mean, hey, look, if you want to get rid of Machamp, period, I also would not die on the hill of needing to preserve it. That said, I do think it's a good Pokemon to have in the game. I do think it provides some positives, because it doesn't have to just be a cheese machine. The problem is that there are many elements in the game of Pokemon, not just in DPP, where if the opponent wants to just roll the dice and go for the cheese, then there are going to be Pokemon that enable that. And Machamp is pretty good at enabling that kind of play. I don't think Machamp is inherently an uncompetitive, stupid Pokemon to have around, but it often gets used as one, and this relates to, Jirachi doesn't have to be that way either, but then you see people staying in on, this used to happen in tournaments a lot. People would have a fully healthy team, and they would keep their Jirachi in on a Heatran, especially defensive Jirachi, and they would live a Fire Blast, and then they would Body Slam and get the Para and Iron Head, and they didn't need to do that. That was just them turning the game into unnecessary dice rolling, because I don't know why, because it would be too much mental effort to switch out. You just wanted to stay in and attack whatever was in front of you. I don't know, but that used to happen a lot. And with Machamp, it does tend to just go, oh, well, we'll just click D-Punch. So it's become kind of a meme that, oh, yeah, Machamp D-Punch to victory, and it's really not that simple. But I do sympathize with the dislike for the odds it brings to the table. So, again, I don't necessarily think you need to do anything, because I think a good team will handle Paraspam not just through the team builder, but through proactive play. But yeah, and obviously when you run slow fighting weak Pokemon, you'd have to take Machamp into account. But I don't know. This is lower on the list, but I also sympathize with the idea of getting rid of Dynamic Punch, or ideally not Machamp, full stop. But yeah, I think most of the player base has a greater hatred for Paraspam than I do. Which, I mean, I don't begrudge them that. I understand it's fundamentally dumb. But I don't know, I never really felt it to be... Excuse me. I never really felt it to be too much of a pressing issue. So, yeah, with Machamp, I don't know. I find it generally tolerable, but ban Dynamic Punch if you have to. Now, with the, I think those are the big ones. Let me check the thread real quick, because I remember there was a mention of Togekiss, but yeah, Jirachi, Machamp, Spore, Clef, those are the big ones. And yeah, I saw one Togekiss thing. Yeah, I don't think anyone else is really... I mean, I understand that Togekiss is very silly. There was a replay earlier on where Togekiss just completely destroyed... Oh, the first replay, actually, where Togekiss just completely destroyed everything. But I definitely sympathize with the potential stupid factor, for lack of a better term. I mean, there's definitely a better term. I'm just being lazy. I also just... there's a reason why Togekiss doesn't get used very much, because that typing is just so not conducive to consistently hitting the field and executing in the face of what the metagame is throwing at you. So, I don't know. Well, I mean, I definitely understand the desire to take Paraspam nonsense to task as a whole. And again, this is why I like the idea of the 20% and higher flinch moves. You get rid of so much of what makes Paraspam annoying. Because if Paraspam is just Machamp, and, slow threats in general, but that's just dealing with paralysis, and not, paralysis plus extra RNG. If it's just Machamp's not going to do the job on its own, not against a good team. So I would definitely... I do think that 20% and higher flinch move ban would solve a lot of issues. Because Togekiss is not going to consistently be ripping through teams like Jirachi is. Because, again, that typing. But, yeah, it definitely removes a cheesy aspect of the game. And I'm all for removing those moments of... or those options for random... or just completely cheesing the opponent just because, oh, you know what, let me roll the dice. This has become very popular over the last couple of years, and I've expressed mixed feelings on it in videos before. The general concept of, oh, I know my opponent's better than me, so I'm just going to roll the dice and RNG. I mean, I understand the statistical, strategy element to it. Like, yes, you want to raise the variance in games that you're not favored in and whatnot, but I also don't really like the defeatist attitude of, oh, my opponent is a god I will never beat in a fair fight, therefore I will just start RNGing my way through. And so I definitely, with that in mind, I definitely support getting rid of every, I mentioned Sand Attack earlier, so, consider this another extension of Sand Attack and its ilk, or Oko Claws, or whatever other extreme RNG-related thing. Limiting it where we can. That's why I'm anti-Dynamic Punch. So, yeah, I think you'll notice a theme in my thoughts on these controversial elements. I'd get rid of the RNG influenced stuff. The Iron Head, even Spore is very RNG heavy with, wake up turns. I mean, you try to sleep talk and you wake up early, even stupid stuff like that. To say nothing of how, if you just get a free KO out of it because of a longer sleep in a faster paced game, then I think that's too powerful. And again, RNG influenced. So, and then, D-Punch and, just flinches in general. No one's talking about Gara anymore. Excuse me, let me try that again. There was a time last year, I think that's what I was alluding to, that people were genuinely, and I know like every year we seem to have, some goofy stuff. Like 2 years ago, oh, Mixed Flygon is genuinely busted, and then, a year later it was like, oh yeah, I don't know how we thought that. It's like, yeah, I don't know why you thought that. I'm glad that has been left long in the past at this point. But last year it was similar stuff, like, oh, or maybe even not a full year ago, but at some point in the year 2023, you get what I'm saying. And then some people were genuinely going, oh yeah, Zapdos. No, I'm just looking at the Zapdos on the screen. Gyarados is too much for the tier, and we need to destroy it in tiering, of course. And now that seems to have completely disappeared. But I also, it wasn't, let me rephrase that. The idea that Gyarados Waterfall does silly things did not begin last year. It's been a long known, facet of the tier that if you get some, if you are relying on something like a defensive Rotom and Gyara DDs, and the rest of your team is swept by it, then you are going to have some games where you just get rolled over by that 20% waterfall flinch, or a little higher than 20% because a crit is also just as also what it would need to win in that situation. But yeah, that's just I think I don't really have an issue with Gyara because, again, I think it's just a matter of good team building. I like the restriction, but on the other hand, I like the restriction, but at the same time, if you reduce the cheesy element, the RNG element, I think that's generally good for the game. So, yeah, let me just see. I don't think, with all due respect to Ladon, I don't think Confuse Ray is going to... I mean, personally, if you ask me, like, should Confuse Ray exist? If I was just, the tyrant in charge, and whatever I say goes, I'd be like, yeah, of course, get rid of Confuse Ray. Why would we want this in the game? It is literally just, hope for 50%. I would not find, I would not want it around. So yeah, maybe we can get rid of it. Who knows? But I don't see it as an issue. Having said that, the idea just popped into my head because I'm a little slow and I haven't connected them before. If you just ban Confusion outright, then you get rid of Confuse Ray and you get rid of Dynamic Punch, and problem solved. So, okay, wow, look at that. Isn't that easy? I'm probably overlooking some confusion-inducing move that has a legitimate place in the tier. Am I? I don't think so. No, I don't think I am. I mean, I probably am overlooking the most obvious thing ever, but I really don't think so. So yeah, I guess add that stance to my thoughts. Ban Confusion. Yeah, ban Confusion, ban high rate flinches, and a lot of your problems are solved. Ban Spore, if not all sleep. These are just healthy. This is just healthy pruning of mechanics. So yeah, not so much, and you don't even need Pokemon bans. And I think it's much preferable to, limit the... Because people say, oh, well, ban Dynamic Punch is essentially neutering Machamp's niche. I don't think so at all. I think last year I was using a lot of bulk-up offensive Machamp on fast-paced teams, and I think those sets are still really, really good, even if you run or they become a different kind of good, because you run Guts as your ability, so you can't get burned anymore, so you can run Leftovers and not fear Will-O-Wisp Rotom on Resthawk Will-O-Wisp Rotom on defensive teams, the ones that you're trying to beat most notably. And you even get a stronger fighting stab in close combat. I mean, yeah, you undo your defense drop, whatever. That's why you have Healing Wish, and you do it again. So yeah, a lefties Guts bulk up offensive Machamp with CC, I think that would be a great Pokemon. So, yeah, that's far. Yeah, I don't think it would completely ruin the niche. And I mean, even if it makes Machamp a little less used, I mean, okay, isn't this the Pokemon that people complain about? So yeah. I think that's basically it. I don't think there's much else to go over, so those are my thoughts on the DPP tiering controversies of 2024. I hope we can overcome this bureaucracy and do something about Ironhead, but that remains to be seen, and I will keep you, the kind viewer, abreast of any developments in the ongoing battle, which seems to be coming to a breaking point, between the players trying to make the game better and those awful bureaucrats who love the rules above all else. Thank you so much for watching / listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.